Hi, and welcome to Understood's Daily Expert Chat. I'm Lindsay Jones with the National Center for Learning Disabilities, where I'm the Vice President and Chief Policy and Advocacy Officer. I'm so excited to be with you today. Here, we're in Washington, D.C., in the U.S. Department of Education's offices with our nation's top special education official, Johnny Collett. Thank you so much, Johnny, for being here with us today. We really, really appreciate it.
It's my pleasure. We're grateful for the opportunity.
Absolutely. Johnny is the Assistant Secretary of the Office of Special Education and Rehabilitation Services. Johnny, you have a long history in special education, in general education, and working in state departments and supporting kids at all and families at all levels. Could you tell us a little bit about your background?
Yeah, I have the good fortune of having seen this work through a few different lenses and from a few different perspectives. I was a high school special education teacher, and then I got to work at the State Department of Education in Kentucky in several different roles. I was an exceptional children consultant. I was an assistant division director. And then I was a division director, and the office where I provided oversight included IDEA, but it also included other program in areas such as Title III and Gifted and Talented. In the office where I provided oversight, we had the Kentucky School for the Blind, Kentucky School for the Deaf, and other programmatic things like RTI. So I'm just really feel fortunate to have seen the work from different perspectives, and now to sort of bring those perspectives to bear on the work that I get to lead here at OSERS is just an incredibly exciting opportunity for me.
Absolutely. I mean, I think we're very pleased that somebody in this position has been in so many of the levels of education that our parents and families interact with. I want to say one thing too quickly. OSERS, which you just referred to, is the sort of nickname for the Office of Special Education and Rehabilitative Services. So we'll use that as we kind of move in and out. Can you tell our families and parents a little bit about what you do here? What's your job here at the Department of Ed?
Yeah, I get the good pleasure of working with an incredible team here at OSERS, and we have two major components, for lack of a better word. We have the Office of Special Education Programs, and then we also have the Rehabilitative Services Administration. So, we get one of the things that strikes me the most, I think, every day, Lindsay, about getting to lead in this role is OSERS really is unique. And the reason I think it's unique is a number of reasons, but one reason is we really get the opportunity to impact across the life of an individual with disability. So really birth through adulthood, including post-secondary opportunities and certainly our goal of competitive integrated employment for individuals. But really when we think about our work across OSEP and RSA, the Rehabilitative Services Administration, really that opportunity to impact across the life of an individual is just something that's incredibly unique and something that I'm just sort of struck by every day.
Yeah, absolutely. And that really parallels, the parent and family experience as well, because certainly they're interacting at many different levels with all different sorts of services and thinking. And you'll see that our questions today, which come mostly from our audience, really reflect that huge age span of issues that you deal with here. So I know that you've only been with OSERS a few months, but the department is making a big shift with some information that it provides on its website. It's just shifting where that information will be located. I wondered if we could talk about that. A year ago, NCLD and other organizations were concerned when there were some what we learned were some website problems here, and we really saw so many parents and others reach out and say, show concern because they use the website and the tools so much. So can you tell us a little bit about what's going to happen and what we can expect?
Yeah, we're really grateful for the feedback. As you mentioned, we had some technology issues and we had an outage issue early last year. But as I think back to when the website first started, which I think was around 2006, a lot of things have changed since 2006. A lot of capabilities that we have now that we didn't have then. So, while we experienced those technical difficulties and that, outage there for a period of time, it really gave us a great opportunity, I think, to think about capabilities we have now that we didn't have then, how we could improve the experience for parents and families and others who really want and need to access this site and rely on this site. So, certainly increased navigation capabilities, better technology, I think improved and enhanced content. I think we previously may have had a number of things across sites at the department, and now being able to sort of bring those things that were across sites into this central location. So I just think overall, I'm hopeful that the experience of the users, parents, families, and others around just being able to more readily and easily navigate the site, find updated content and resources. And much of that, really, frankly, in feedback, great feedback from parents and families and others who had used the site and wanted to continue to find it useful. So we update that at least weekly and continue to update it based on, largely, again, based on feedback from parents and families.
That's great. If parents are, the new site, I think, completely launches April 30th. Is that correct?
Yeah, the legacy site, as we're calling it, the old site,
Okay.
I think we'll kind of close that down at the end of the month, and then that's what we'll have is this new site.
Okay.
And so what I want to make sure, the important content, the relevant content, we haven't lost anything, and we'll continue to rely on feedback from parents and families and others to make sure we've got it right and continue to get it right for them.
That's great. And it sounds like there will be a spot for parents or others. If they are looking for something, there'll be some area there where they can contact someone, or if they were looking for something they couldn't find, what would they do?
Yeah, on the new site, there is a blog where you can provide feedback. So that's
Okay.
there, and I would certainly want to know and make sure the right people knew if folks were having a hard time finding that.
Great. That's great. We really appreciate it. So the next area that we want to tackle that has come up is that when shortly after President Trump took office, he issued an executive order to all of the departments asking them to review their guidance, many of their documents. In the fall, we saw the Department of Education rescind or remove about 70 documents involving individuals with disabilities. Where is the department in that process now? Are there other documents that might be rescinded? We saw a great chart that was issued by the department that explained what each of those documents were, but I think here again we saw parents and families really use this information. I know we advocates, like the National Center for Learning Disabilities, we definitely use it. So I'm just wondering if you could just give us a sense of where you are in that process, what you expect to be coming next.
Yeah, well, we will, as all agencies, be responsive and continue to be responsive to the President's executive order. And, that was a beginning of a process that you mentioned that occurred those months ago. And, we continue that process now. Obviously, we're continuing to look at remaining documents and guidance and whatever subject to the executive order. And that's an ongoing process. So we just sort of wrapped up within the last month kind of a comment period and an opportunity for folks to kind of share their thoughts about that. And we're continuing to compile all of that and review all of that. And, I just want to make sure that your listeners and viewers are aware that the comments that you submitted will be and are thoughtfully considered, and very much an important part of this process as we make decisions in response to the executive order. But I would also say, with respect to our office here at the Office of Special Education and Rehabilitative Services, and I'll say OSERS too because it just doesn't take as long. But when you think about our mission is, as you know very well, Lindsay, to improve early childhood educational and employment outcomes and raise expectations for all people with disabilities, their families, their communities, and the nation. So while we certainly are being responsive to the executive order, I want folks to know for sure that my lens through this is also making sure that we have the right information and the right regulations, the best that we can have to deliver on our mission and our common goal, that every individual has improved outcomes in early childhood education and employment.
Great. That's really great to hear. And it makes me think of, we were so excited, and so many of the parents who come to our Understood community were so excited to see the ruling in Andrew F. And that came out last January. And parents it has been a top rated piece of content, and it was a top submitted question that we saw across our channels to ask you about today. And so Andrew F. was the Supreme Court case that basically ruled that that school districts and that circuit courts had to meet design IEPs to show progress, to show in ways that were appropriately ambitious, that goals that were appropriately ambitious. The department put out an FAQ, a frequently asked questions document in December about that, and we've created and understood and parent toolkit with questions and talking points that it can help parents see how this comes alive in their meetings. A lot of our questions were about the department's position and ability to help states meet those new guidelines that we got from the court. So what does the department do to make sure that states are accountable for providing this new standard of free, appropriate public education?
Well, you're very familiar, and I think most of the folks who are listening and viewing are familiar with our general supervision responsibilities. I mean, that's something that's a part of our work and every day, and that continues. And so certainly as it relates to implementation of those types of things that we typically and routinely take a look at anyway. I mean, that's obviously going to be a main priority of ours moving forward. Mm-hmm. So that doesn't change. I mean, that mechanism's in place, that commitment's in place. We'll keep doing our work.
And that's the oversight of the states themselves and how they implement
IDA, for example, as I think we're getting at here. And with respect to Andrew specifically, you know, I've certainly made it no secret that in my view, that was a landmark decision by the court for millions of children and families across the country. And, you know, we, as you mentioned, I think pretty quickly followed that up with the Q&A that I've heard has been helpful, I hope has been helpful to many people. But one of the things I was concerned about, not concerned, but interested in as I transition into this role is what else can we do? Are there other things we can do? What's appropriate for us to do as a Federal Department of Education? And that's one of the things I want to make clear here is I'm going to always be very, very committed to not overstepping our federal role as a Department of Education. But you know, more than one thing can be true at the same time. While we're not going to overstep our federal role as the Department of Education, I also want to be really careful not to understep it, if that makes sense, right? So where there is a need and where we can add value and where it's appropriate and where it helps states and families and parents best serve individuals with disabilities, we want to do that. So we did the Q&A. You may know that we just launched a symposia series. We had a symposium I think it's a week or so ago, and you know, we've had some of those in the past that have been really successful. This one had a very large number of people who participated in it, but I want you to know what the focus of it was. It really was an opportunity in part to build off the work we had started with the Q&A in response to the court's decision in Andrew. And really this first symposium was focused on sort of laying the foundation of the research around IEPs. Why is it important to have and to develop and implement a quality IEP that would really aim to help individuals make progress in light of their circumstances and really set out those challenging objectives and opportunities, and that every child, not some, not most, but each child should have a chance to meet those challenging objectives. You know, so what sort of is the research and based around that? So we spent a time doing that, and we heard from experts, we heard from parents of children with disabilities, we heard from others in that first symposium. But then looking ahead, I want your viewers to know that looking ahead, it's a series of symposiums. So we started with that, but then as we think ahead toward the next one, how do we sort of work that research out into practice, and what's that look like? And you know, if this is what kids need, one of the things that's just broadly important to us as a department and broadly important to me in terms of my leadership here at OSERS is when I'm always going to talk about the needs of kids and families first. That's always going to be the priority. But I'm never just going to talk about the needs of kids because I don't think that serves kids well. I think if this is what your child needs, then the next question ought to be, well, what do the rest of the people in that system need? What do teachers need? What do leaders need? What do other folks in that school or system need to make sure that we can best support this individual with a disability to achieve the outcomes that we and frankly they envision. So deeply committed to talking about the needs of kids and families first, but then also talking about what do the leaders in those systems need to support them. And then really looking at opportunities broadly within OSERS to figure out how do we put a spotlight on where parents and families and districts and schools and others are working well to implement IEPs that really are aimed at enabling children to make progress in light of their circumstances. So I hope what you get through that is it's a landmark decision. It gives us an opportunity to do work we wanted to do and put a really special spotlight on something that I think we've got a window of opportunity to work together on to make an incredible difference.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it's great to hear you say that. So many of our parents who are watching or interact with us have children with IEPs or 504 plans, and so they are deeply engaged in goals. What do they mean? Objectives, how do we show progress? And I think they've appreciated the department's FAQ, its focus on what does this mean for IEPs, some of the guidance that had been put out around, especially for our children with learning disabilities, how can an IEP, when a child is grade levels behind, what does an IEP team do to show how that progress can be made and that they're really reaching for those high standards? I think those things have been very helpful, and it's great to hear you kind of frame them in the light of the work of the full department. In that vein of sort of teachers, leaders, and others in the school who must be well prepared and ready to enact all of these, to meet the promise of NDRU, probably the number one question that we get involves teacher professional development. And I wonder if you can talk about, and if you could talk about a little bit about what the department does in terms of helping prepare teachers, helping provide resources to schools for teachers to ensure that they have access to things like early screening, that they know to look for issues early on. And I think it's so interesting in light of most of our children, as you know better than anyone because of your career, are in general ed classrooms almost all day. And so OSERS, the special education department, has a unique role to play in understanding and helping professional development of all those teachers around things like screening for disabilities. So what does OSERS do or fund around professional development or preparation for teachers and in involving issues like screening?
Yeah, I'm always sort of careful about just singling out one investment. I'm always afraid I'm going to forget, but let me try. Let me try to be as responsive as I can around that. I think I'm happy for the term professional development. I get what it means, right? So I don't take any exception with the term. What helps me keep my head around it is to think about how do we best support states, to support districts, to support schools, teams, buildings, individuals. What's our role to best support those actors in addressing the capacity issues of folks in that system? So it kind of goes back to what I said a few minutes ago. I think about capacity issues. Well, when I was in a state or in a district or in a school, I didn't want to presume what the capacity issues of folks were. What are the capacity issues and sort of how do I know? And then how am I going to address those capacity issues? So then swing it all back around to the role I'm in now. What's our role as the Department of Education? And you know well that OSERS funds a number of investments, and again, that's where I don't want to start singling those out. I'm afraid I'll forget really important ones that are doing great work. But we have significant investments in personnel development that are supported through our Part D monies through IDEA, and I think we have a long history in OSERS of supporting personnel development, and we meet folks all around the country all the time who were supported through their master's or through a doctorate or something like that, and in those programs. But we also support technical assistance centers that focus clearly on how do we prepare teachers and leaders to really be ready when they enter the profession, enter a building, enter a classroom, and encounter a diverse group of kids, and some of those kids with disabilities, and some who need support, and some who need significant support. So, we have a long-standing commitment. I'm committed to continue a commitment to making sure that we make investments and support states to support those capacity issues. And it's a sort of a similar thing those who are closest to it are going to know best what the issues are, and they're going to, have the best ideas. I think we can be helpful to sort of be incubators of ideas and thought partners and brokers. But those folks who are closest to the work, closest to the teacher, closest to the child, they're going to have the best ideas. And what I want to do is figure out how we best invest in that and how we best support the innovations that'll happen locally. That'll be the best ones anyway.
Yeah, and I think that's so true that being close to it gives you a viewpoint that you just don't have from far away. But I think it's great to hear that the department is providing this symposium series and other things, ways that it can really. Right. Of course, there's significant investments in professional development, but there are great ways that the department can help ensure that everyone gets the information they need about how much possibility there is for children's performance and what we can be doing. I want to ask another question just that's very specific, and I know that I don't want to make you speak about very specific investments, but the idea of early identification of issues with reading, math, other disabilities, it is a top concern for our parents. And, trying to make sure that our children are, because we know that the investing in children younger can really show some great gains for them and decrease our investments later in life, actually. The department, so this is an issue I think that we are struggling with. How can parents and families and others in their communities, and how can the department really help our teachers and our school systems better identify children earlier when they struggle to learn?
Well, I'll tell you, I think sometimes folks assume I know things. Let me just tell you, don't assume I know anything, right? So what I would say is, in a lot of ways, I know what you tell me. So I think back to being a state special education director, and I just benefited every week in one way or another, daily, some weeks, from really the input from critical stakeholders, those most impacted by the decisions that we made, those most impacted by the conversations we were having. And it was critically important for me to be able to hear from those who had a stake in the success of kids, because we all do, right? And that's one of the messages I want to make sure is clear for me, and I want folks to hold me accountable to it, is we all have a stake in the success of individuals with disabilities. You do as individuals, we do as organizations that support parents and families and individuals with disabilities, we do as a Department of Ed, we do as a nation. So we all individually, collectively have a stake in the success of individuals with disabilities. But one of the things I want to make really clear that is important to me every day is that while we all have a stake in their success, no one has more of a stake in their success than they do. And so I really have always felt, and I still feel like, I work on their behalf. So the best way for me to work on their behalf is to work with those who know them best and to work with those who are closest to them. So I would routinely benefit from folks providing me information about a particular disability, let's say, for example, and maybe we didn't know as much as we needed to know about that as a state. And maybe from our role, we could share information, even basic information that thousands of teachers may or may not have, but from our role, we could share that with them, and we learned it from those who knew it best. So we are committed to your specific question. We are committed to supporting states to make sure there is timely and appropriate identification of needs that kids have. So any way we can do that, and one of the ways we can do that is to make sure we understand from those who know best what the issues are, but I want to make sure folks know we are committed to supporting states around timely and appropriate identification.
That's great to hear, and I think there are 2 million parents a month that come to Understood, and we want them to be able to feel empowered and advocate, and so it's great to hear you're open to that and you're welcoming of those viewpoints and
Absolutely.
That information and experience that comes from them.
Yeah.
I want to shift to a particular case, and that is one involving the state of Texas. And that is because we saw over the past couple of years, there's been a lot of media attention, and Texas is a large state, so we've had a lot of parents from Texas reach out and ask about what's happening there. There's been a lot of media attention about some policies that might have been in place that restricted the number of children who could be identified for special education, regardless of their need, let's say. The department in this past February, came out with what I think is probably, in the years I've been doing this, one of the strongest statements the department has issued about oversight of a state and what that state was doing. I wonder, it seemed that the department, it issued some pretty strong findings that the state wasn't appropriately identifying and wasn't providing appropriate services as a result. Can you talk to us a little bit about what the department can do in an ongoing way to support Texas, the educators there that will need to be involved, the parents and families, the individuals who may need services? What's the role of the federal department now in an ongoing way?
Sure. Well, I think you mentioned our oversight role to start with. So obviously that's a key part of our role, and in working with any state, in this case, Texas. I think we issued our report in June. Maybe it's February. Okay. Anyway,
June.
So we issued
Maybe
our
it
report.
was June.
We issued our report, and the findings that you mentioned, and I'll start by saying, frankly, from my view, I've been very encouraged by the work that's going on in Texas. And when we released our report, I think it was pretty public knowledge. The governor was very interested in that in Texas, and the governor called on the Department of Education to kind of quickly pull together a plan, and which the Department of Education did, and really started to seek input from the public, and have held multiple sessions and heard from hundreds and hundreds, I think, of stakeholders, and continued to sort of work on versions of that plan that incorporated the feedback they were hearing from across the state through listening sessions or surveys or other means that they were acquiring information. So I've been encouraged by what I'm seeing happening in Texas, and I think the plan is due relatively soon, and we'll see that plan, and we'll take a look at that plan and fulfill our responsibilities in terms of oversight as the Department of Education, and looking at that plan and ensuring that it addresses the findings that were in the report. But we stand ready to work with Texas or any state as it needs us, and as we can be helpful in terms of technical assistance to really, I think, continue to progress toward this new era that I believe they envision, and I believe is envisioned across other states in our country. And we want very much to work with states to provide technical assistance that's appropriate for them to achieve the outcomes that they, with their stakeholders, are envisioning for kids.
That's great to hear. I just can't imagine they won't need extra help coming in. I mean, there's a huge number of students who might have been, as their own reports show, who might have been impacted by this. And so we just, at NCLD, we're very concerned about making sure parents have good information about evaluations, teachers have good information about identification and signs. And I think it's a really great to hear the department will continue in an ongoing way there. I think something I can say, but I won't post to you necessarily, is we certainly hope there is funding to back that up as well, because we know what resources are needed to provide that type of help. So we certainly are focused on making sure we, from the advocacy community, can help support the parents and families there. And that it sounds great, like that the department has a plan for ongoing assistance. There are lots of technical assistance centers and others who could provide help and support. That seems to be what you're saying.
Well, we've worked closely with the state throughout this
Great.
process. We're working closely with them now. We'll continue to work
Great.
closely with them. And as I said, we'll fulfill our responsibilities, but we also will stand ready to assist the state in any way that's helpful and that we can.
That's great. That's great. I really appreciate that. It is one of the topics that I want to make sure that we address, and that you, as you can imagine, not just for our parents, but every parent in the nation, is top of mind. Including me, including all of us, including you, is the issue of school safety. And this year in particular, we've seen such media attention and rise around school safety. Of course, the marches, the Parkland incident, and we've seen so many things happen. We think of that in many terms also for children with disabilities, and the impact that different measures taken by schools can have on those children. Can you talk a little bit about the department's view of this, the various supports? There can be positive climate supports that are put in place, behavior and evidence-based supports, but there are lots of measures I know the department is thinking through right now. Can you just talk a little bit about what you know about that and how students with disabilities are involved?
Yeah, so I join you, of course, and those who are joining us now or later who will take a look at this. We deeply regret, of course, and are incredibly saddened. Deeply impacted as individuals, as citizens, as Americans, as parents, right? Deeply impacted and saddened by the state that it seems our world is in sometimes, and certainly these specific and tragic occurrences across our country that have happened far too often and far too much. So the department continues to examine issues contributing to school violence, and I think our Secretary DeVos is heading the Federal Commission on School Safety, and that will yield some meaningful recommendations around this. And so I look forward to that work continuing, and OSERS is a part of conversations around school safety and how we can figure out what those factors are and where we add value and where we can support. And so I'm a part of conversations around that. OSERS will continue to be engaged in this work to ensure that the particular needs of students with disabilities are at the forefront of these conversations. That is occurring. That will continue to occur. And we have a long history, as you sort of leaned into here at OSERS, in terms of thinking about, and in terms of the department's investments, in terms of thinking about those broader systems of support. I think we look forward to continuing to learn a lot more about this. But I think one of the things we probably all could agree on, there's likely not a singular solution here. So there are likely many things that will contribute to kind of righting this ship. But our experience with systems of support, I think, is something that we bring to this, and we're excited about continuing that conversation. But to assure your viewers that OSERS is engaged in this, will continue to be engaged in this, to make sure that the needs of kids with disabilities are at the forefront of the conversations.
That's so important to hear, and directly from you, I think, as well. We can't overstate the impact. You did a great job kind of talking about how much we're all so impacted by this. And we just, I think about kids with disabilities, and children with disabilities are disproportionately disciplined. This has been a huge issue for years throughout reauthorizations of IDEA. So they're already subject to some of those measures, and they have, we're just, as you can imagine, as advocates at our core, we want to be sure that in every one of those conversations, you are a member of the OSERS team is present, that we see you, that you're listening, as you said earlier, to what families are saying and how they're impacted. And that the National Center for Learning Disabilities just last week sent a letter to Secretary DeVos, request just amplifying that need and our hope for the inclusion of this community. Not that it's been excluded, but that we sent a letter because we were concerned about some cases where we felt that it was excluded, but we want to be sure that it's lifted up, and that these children who will be impacted so directly, just because of we already know they're being impacted by these policies more than other kids, that they're a part of the conversations, and that those needs, the experts here in the department who've worked on positive behavior implementation and supports and others, are voices that are coming to that conversation. So it's terrific to hear you talk about that, and we will look forward to continuing that discussion as a nation.
If I may, the Secretary is committed to supporting states to make sure that we have safe and enabling and empowering environments for kids to learn, and so deeply committed to that. She's deeply committed to continuing to learn and to hear and to receive feedback from stakeholders. So, there will be additional opportunity for folks to provide feedback with respect to these issues, and particularly hearing from individuals in the disability community. So, we'll be excited to continue working together in that.
That's great. We'd love to, we'll be watching for that and promoting it with our parents. And, I think that also special education and OSERS probably across the whole department has done invested more in positive behavior, evidence-based supports, other types of supports that can really help all kids in the school. Right. And that's actually a question I have for you in general. I maybe I am biased, but I do think special education and the investments there leads the way for a lot of approaches that can help all kids and really can be useful by teachers and leaders to support full school environments. I wonder if you can just talk a little bit about that, about some of the investments you have or things that you see, ways that you see that OSERS can support the whole department in the same way we think of something that helps MTSS or response to intervention, other types of systems that support all learners in the school.
Yeah, we've sort of mentioned it a couple of times, but our work in positive behavior interventions and supports and our investments there, I think, it highlights a couple of things in my view. It highlights certainly the department's longstanding commitment to systems of support and really contributing to the kind of environment the Secretary wants kids to have every day. So I think it highlights that commitment, but I think it also highlights a commitment to meaningful and effective collaboration here at the department. You may know, your folks who are viewing may or may not know, that the center that we support on positive behavior intervention supports is jointly done with the Office of Elementary and Secondary Education here at the department. So I think it highlights those two things, if I may, the importance of the systems of support, but it also highlights the meaningful and effective collaboration that I think is happening here at the department and I think will continue to happen. So we want to model that kind of collaboration that we know is critical at the local level for success.
That's terrific. I think that's great. We've seen really good things come out of that collaboration for just discussions that are helping all kids in the schools and really helping general education teachers better understand how to work with children in their classroom who do have disabilities. One of the top questions that we get, and one of the reasons and one of the goals are understood, is to show the success and to empower parents and show that we believe, to kind of show what high expectations lead to and why we talk about that. And you've used that term, I've heard you use it for as long as I've known you. That is something I know that is important to you. Some of the questions came in, surprised me, because there were a lot of parents hearing negative language in schools about kids with disabilities, some hurtful language around that, and we really want to move the needle on stigma and have everyone embrace who they are, what they do. And I wonder if you can talk a little bit about just any plans the department may have to deal with stigma, to also maybe lift up the strengths of individuals with disabilities, the way that even if it's within the way you're leading, if there's a program around it. I think those types of things. Strengths-based IEPs is something we're going to be promoting. Just trying to get into the mindset, not just looking at a child's deficits and the ways we need to help them accelerate, but also their amazing gifts and the ways that they engage with the world. I know it's a really broad question.
I was just thinking, you got into the sweet spot here. Do we have enough time, right, is what I was wondering. But, what I hope and what I want folks to hold me accountable for is the way that we lead here. OSERS has been a mission-driven organization long before I got here and done great work. They'll continue to do great work long after I'm gone. But while I'm here, the folks can expect that we're going to continue to put a spotlight on the individual. And we're going to continue to call attention to both high expectations and appropriate supports, not one without the other. I talk about this, as you know, every day in some way in every meeting I'm in because I feel an obligation and I feel a passion around this and commitment to this, and I feel this is a great opportunity for me to continue to say things out loud to kind of get at some of these issues, right? It's almost like there are things that we agree on, and if we say them, folks start nodding their head, but there's just incredible power in saying them out loud. So we have high expectations for kids, but we're not just going to talk about high expectations without extending that conversation to the actual resources and supports the individuals need to be successful. On the other side of that, I don't think we ought to have conversations that just talk about all the supports someone needs and then perpetuate, even in a well-meaning way, a culture of low expectations. What I would argue is that either one of those conversations without the other will continue to be completely inadequate to improve the outcomes for kids that we, and most importantly, they envision. So we're going to call attention to that conversation at that intersection, both high expectations and appropriate supports. So what I say often, and I hope this communicates well, and if it doesn't, again, hold me accountable for it and I'll try to clear it up. But I may have a short conversation, but I'm not going to have a long debate with anybody about whether or not we ought to have high expectations for each individual. To me, that's non-negotiable. Mm-hmm. So while high expectations is non-negotiable, they're also individually realized. I think you can have both of those conversations. You don't have to surrender one without the other. Mm-hmm. We're going to have high expectations for individuals, respecting who they are and their dignity and all the things that you just mentioned. And we're going to say these things out loud, but at the same time, we're going to recognize that those high expectations are individually realized because these are individuals. Mm-hmm. And I just feel again an incredible obligation to try to talk about both of those things at the same time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I think that's right. That it is important. Seeing these questions come in, sometimes because we, in our world, I think we do talk about high expectations and how to get there. We may disagree at times, and I appreciate always, the professional relationship that we have to be able to continue to talk about those things.
Yes.
But I think it is important to say it. It continually, people need to see it. We need to make sure that everyone has a good sense of what that looks like and that it's possible. And so it's great to hear that from you here today. And so I think I just want to say thank you for giving us your time and for always being open and willing, for mentioning today that you are ready to continue to listen to parents and you invite them in and their comments. You've offered a couple of opportunities through the blog and through other things, and we really appreciate you offering all of that up. And I always appreciate you. As I said, we may disagree on things. We didn't get too into it today, but we always can continue to talk, and I think that is what that's what helps us all keep moving this discussion forward and keeping it about the kids.
Well, it's true, and I appreciate you. I appreciate your partnership and NCLD and Understood.org. One of the things I failed to mention a few minutes ago around Andrew that I wanted to mention is, I know that Understood, I think, did a great job pulling together these talking points for parents and pulling together this worksheet, and that's something that I'm certainly aware of, and glad that the organization had that opportunity, and I'm sure that parents are finding that incredibly useful in terms of not only navigating the situation, but really advocating for what we've talked about today, and so I look forward to continuing these partnerships and. Excited for the intersections that we'll find to do great work together, again, on behalf of the individual, right? That's why we're here.
Absolutely. Thank you so much to our guest today, Assistant Secretary Johnny Collett. This chat will be archived on Understood in case you want to watch it again or share it, and you can find the interview as well as information about other expert chats upcoming on u.org/calendar. So thanks again for joining us.
Thank you.
Have a great day.